Good morning. My name is Herb Moyer. I'm a longtime Exeter resident, and I'm very involved in the Exeter cable TV program, the public access program, and I believe in the value of community public access TV and its ability to serve the New Hampshire civic interests of our community and more broadly support for our democracy. In that spirit, here today with us is the Republican candidate for the position of Rockingham County Attorney, Pat Conway. Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Please tell viewers a bit about yourself, where you live, education, history, family, your work, background, etc.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Pat Conway. I'm the Rockingham County Attorney, and I have been your Rockingham County Attorney for about 6 years now. Thank you for your prior support. I love my job. I don't take that for granted. I get to get up every day and do something I really love. I'm from Salem, New Hampshire, originally Atkinson, went to Timberlane Regional High School. I live in Salem now with my husband, my 21-year-old son, my 14-year-old daughter. I went to Rivier College. It's now Rivier University. I went to the institution when it was a college and when it was all women, and I played basketball there. I was a captain my senior year at Rivier College. And after that, I went to Suffolk University Law School in Boston, Massachusetts. And my second year of law school, I interned for the Essex District Attorney's Office and fell in love with the job. They put me before a judge. I was doing arraignments and different types of hearings, and I just absolutely loved it, fell in love with it, and never turned back. After that, I continued on. Was an intern at the Rockingham County Attorney's Office when I was in law school. I was a prosecutor in Plymouth, the Plymouth area at the Plymouth Circuit Court for a few years. And then I got a call from the county attorney in Rockingham who hired me in 1999 as an assistant county attorney, and I worked there for, I want to say, around 16 years before I ran for county attorney. So that's generally my history. I have a twin sister who lives in North Carolina. We're very close. Mm-hmm. And I have a dog and a cat. So my life is pretty full and crazy in a good way.
I'm sure it is. You never know about these connections. I spent the last 2.5 years of high school living in Plastow, not far, and my sister went to Timberlane. She's older, though. Tell us about the Rockingham County position, the offices, the organization, its mission, and what it does for the residents of Rockingham County.
Sure. Well, our mission at the County Attorney's Office is to provide ethical and professional prosecutorial services for the citizens of Rockingham County with the goal of achieving justice for victims and reducing recidivism rates. That's our mission. Many people don't really understand what we do at the County Attorney's Office. But what we do is we handle and we prosecute serious felony level criminal offenses. So things like rape, sexual assault, really serious physical assaults where people are seriously injured. We handle negligent homicide cases, manslaughter, home invasions, burglaries. Basically anything you can imagine, we prosecute it. At the County Attorney's Office in Rockingham, we have 20 attorneys that I supervise. We also have legal assistants, we have victim witness advocates, and we have 2 investigators. And I'm really proud of my staff. They work really hard day in and day out to prosecute cases and really deal with some very heavy things. But we support one another, and my staff, I believe, does a great job.
Do you feel the office gets the financial resources that it needs from the state and from the county?
I do. I have to say that when I go before the commissioners with my budget request, they've really been, for the most part, very helpful and very supportive. Over the years, our caseload has grown tremendously. So I had to ask for new prosecutorial positions, attorney positions, I think 4 over the last 6 years. And also I asked for a victim advocate position, 2 or 3 more legal assistants, and over the past 6 years, the commissioners have allowed me to do that. Now, of course, they've asked me for statistics and to show them the evidence that I do need those positions, and I've been able to do that and advocate, I think, effectively for my office to get those positions so that people aren't overwhelmed when they're doing their job. So for the most part, I think they've been great. I think we've got a great team in Rockingham County.
That's great. What is the budget of the office approximately?
So it's about $3.5 million.
Okay.
Yep.
And how does that compare with other New Hampshire counties? It's probably one of the larger ones, right?
It is. So Rockingham County is the second largest county. Hillsborough obviously is first, and their budget, I'm sure, is higher. But I think other than Hillsborough, ours is probably the highest just because we have the highest caseload.
Sure.
In terms of other states, I'm sure their budgets are higher because just thinking about Massachusetts, just because the population in Massachusetts is so much higher, and I think their crime rate is higher, so their budgets have to be much larger than mine. But states like Maine, where they may not have as much crime, I'm sure their budgets are lower, and there's less population there as well.
If only those darn criminals would spread out across the state more often.
I know, it would make it a lot easier for all of us.
I just want to interject, the town is having some work done, so if you hear some pounding periodically, try to ignore it. They're doing some work.
Okay.
Is there a relationship between the Public Defender's Office and your office? I would think they might be considered adversarial.
So it is adversarial just by the nature of our positions, because the state obviously is advocating against their client, the defendant, and the defense attorney is advocating for the defendant's rights. Right. So it's somewhat adversarial that way. However, the way that I think about it, and I think the way that most of my attorneys think about it in my office, is we're really working together to ensure that the criminal justice system works for the defendant, for the victim, for the community in general. So in some ways, we're actually working together to achieve that goal, because we do have to start at the arraignment, and then if the defendant wishes to have a trial, we'll go through the entire process and have a jury trial, and we're all involved in that.
Right.
And we all have to do our part to make sure that it works and that it's successful. So the defense attorney needs to make sure that he or she advocates for their client's rights and files any motions that they need to file, and the state needs to do the same thing, and we need to do it in a professional manner with integrity. And I think if both sides do that and the judge maintains control over the courtroom, then we achieve our goal, which is to make sure that the criminal justice system works. And I'll also tell you that, being in this business for over 20 years, I've worked with the Public Defender's Office for a very long time, and I consider many of them to be my friends. Mm-hmm. They do a great job. They really do a wonderful job for defendants in our county, and I'm sure in the entire state.
You hear stories from other states that are not so equitable. I just learned from a series that Alabama doesn't have a civic defender's office. They have no way to provide defense for the client that can't afford it, which is kind of odd. Yeah.
That's surprising.
Yeah. So what inspired you to get into politics, and when did you decide to do that, and was it the right thing for you? So
I never thought when I was younger that I would be sitting here as an elected official. I just never did. It was not something that I thought of. I will say that we would have spirited conversations at the dinner table with my dad and my mom and my sister about different issues. My dad would encourage me to run for office as I got older, in my 20s. And I said, Dad, I'm never going to do that. It's never going to happen. But I love my job. I loved it as an assistant county attorney, and I did it for so many years that when my predecessor left, I felt that I could make a bigger difference in the community by running the office and implementing different programs and training prosecutors and really having the say in terms of how we were going to prosecute cases, who we were going to charge, what kinds of sentencing recommendations we would make, and those kinds of things. So I knew I could make a difference. I knew I could do a good job. So I ran for office. Unfortunately, my dad passed away before I ran and before I actually won, but I know he would be super proud, and I'm sure he's looking down right now saying, "I told you so."
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. So, what do you consider your personal or professional attributes that you feel have made you well suited for this position?
Well, I think honesty is super important, and being objective and fair is very, very important. And not only that, but you have to be a hard worker. You have to have good work ethic because you've got to go the extra mile. You've got to go the extra mile for the victims, for your staff. And if you do that, you'll be successful, but you can't be complacent. You just have to keep working. And I feel that I am a hard worker, and I take pride in being a very objective person. I think I'm a very fair person. And that's super important for any prosecutor, not just the county attorney.
I was reviewing some of the legal standards for being a lawyer, and there's certainly plenty of things that have to be covered about, objectivity, fairness, honesty, procedures about making sure the other side has all the facts that you've gathered. A lot to it.
Right.
So have any of those issues in terms of possibly disciplining some staff ever come up in your office?
Things can come up when people are less experienced attorneys, but what we try to do and what I think we're successful at is we pair our younger or less experienced attorneys with our more experienced attorney. So sometimes you may be involved in something like trial preparation, and you're talking to a witness and letting them know these are the questions we're going to ask you during the trial, and maybe the person says something, and a lesser experienced attorney may not know if that's something that needs to be turned over or not.
Oh, yeah.
So if it's exculpatory, it absolutely
Explain
has to.
exculpatory.
So exculpatory essentially means if it's some piece of information or evidence that could be helpful to the defense.
Yeah.
So if it's exculpatory, you absolutely have to turn it over. And really, if it's relevant at all to the case, my philosophy is it should be turned over. My office, we engage in what we call open file discovery. We want the defense to have all the information that we have. This is about a search for truth, a search for justice. It's not about hiding anything. So to answer your question, we really don't have to discipline people too much for that, because we really make sure that when people are not as experienced, that they're with someone who can lead them in the right direction. We also have trainings about what's exculpatory and what is not, and we encourage attorneys to speak up and ask if they're not sure.
Sure.
If you're not sure, then come to me, go to the deputy county attorney, and we'll let you know. But we always try to err on the side of caution, because we never want to hold anything back from a defendant. This is an important process, and they need to have all the information.
In my two professions, teaching and financial services, there are recertification requirements for teachers and for financial professionals. I assume those are the same for lawyers.
Right. We have CLE credits, continuing legal education credits, that we have to obtain every year. So not only do my attorneys participate in those types of trainings, but we also offer trainings in-house. So we have a meeting with all of our attorneys once a week, and not every week, but pretty often I'll have one of the more experienced attorneys present on some type of issue. And again, it's just in areas that we think people could improve on, and we do that weekly in my office.
Is the jury selection process that one sees on television similar to what it is at the county level?
That's I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Jury selection process, the voir dire and rejecting certain potential jurors because of some background issue or something they said, or not being able to say that, yes, I could give the death penalty in that.
That you see on TV, is that what?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
just wondering if it's similar.
It is very similar, but what I tell people all the time, because when people come into our office and they're involved in the criminal justice system, whether they're a witness or a victim, they come to us very nervous, which is understandable, but sometimes we forget that for me, it's my home away from home. I feel more comfortable in court than I do anywhere else, except my home.
Yeah.
So you forget that people can be nervous. And so I always joke with people and tell them, yeah, it's sort of similar, but it's not exciting. It's not as exciting as that. It's not as glamorous as that.
Right.
When you watch TV, you'll see a packed courtroom with, everybody's there watching. Usually when we have a trial, there might be a handful of people in there. There's not a lot of fanfare. But the process of voir dire is similar. There's just a lot of things they do on TV, obviously, that make it a little more entertaining.
Oh, sure.
But
Sure. What advice would you give to a young person considering pursuing a career in law?
I would advise that person to try to mentor or shadow someone that's in the profession. There's so many different types of law. I prefer criminal, obviously, because I've been doing it for so many years, and I really can't imagine myself doing anything else. But there's so many different types of law. I mean, there's tax attorneys, there's contract attorneys, there's divorce lawyers, there's family court lawyers. There's just so many different types. So I would try to shadow folks to see what type of law you like the best. And these days, everyone really specializes. There's not too many lawyers that do anything, everything anymore. Yeah. So I would advise a younger person to do that, just to make sure it's what you want to do, because it's something you're going to be doing your whole life.
Sounds like good advice. Can you share some stories of people in the legal profession or not, living or dead, whom you admire and why you admire them?
So one person that I admire is Judge Shawako Gardner. She is a judge for circuit court, and I met her as an assistant county attorney back in 1999. Back in 1999, we had a jury trial project in circuit courts. So we actually had jury trials in Derry District Court. We had some in Salem District Court, Portsmouth District Court, and it was a project for misdemeanors. We don't do that anymore. So during that time frame, Judge Gardner was my supervisor and became my mentor. She was a public defender before she became a prosecutor, and she really taught me to look at both sides of the story, or both sides of the case, and not just to see the case from one side, which is the prosecutor's side. She's also just a really brilliant, intelligent woman. I used to call her the walking law library, because I could ask her a question and she always had the answer.
Wow.
And also just a wonderfully nice human being, very positive person. When we had the jury trial project, we were trying a lot of cases, because with the misdemeanors, there wasn't as much to lose, so many of the defendants wanted jury trials. So it was very quick, fast-paced. I learned a lot. But it was helpful to have someone there that was a great person and just supportive and just very knowledgeable. So I respect her a lot. And she's definitely my mentor and someone I continue to look up to. She lives in Rye, New Hampshire. And I also, my dad was just a huge part of my life growing up and really encouraged me to reach for the stars, and taught me the value of hard work. And he worked really hard to give us everything that we needed, just supported my sister and I, and again, encouraged us to be the best that we could be. And at times where I didn't know that I could do it, I didn't know if I was smart enough, I didn't know if I was good enough, and he pushed me. And I think all kids need that, and that's what my dad was for me, so I'd say my father as well.
Great. Do you lament the passing of that jury trial process for misdemeanors? I mean, would it still be a good program if it was funded today?
I don't know that it would be a good program for the state. And the reason that I say that is because I think ultimately right now what happens is a defendant has a bench trial in circuit court. So they get a trial, and if they're convicted, they can appeal it to the Superior Court for a whole new, it's basically a whole new fact-finding trial. We don't see a lot of appeals. We don't see many at all, like maybe a handful or two for the entire year. I'm sorry, there's a fly.
That fly loves you.
He does love me. So we don't see many appeals, and back in the day when we had the jury trial project, there were a ton of jury trials, and I just believe that we must have spent a lot of taxpayer dollars for those jury trials.
Unnecessarily, maybe?
Unnecessarily, when I think that judges can do can do a great job, and if the defendant does want a jury trial, they can always appeal their conviction to the Superior Court.
Okay, great. Your job would seem to be very rewarding but challenging. Bringing people to justice and protecting the public, that's a tough job. Can you share a particularly difficult case or situation that you've faced in the job and how you dealt with it? No
Sure.
names, of course.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
One that comes to mind is a sexual assault case where a doctor sexually assaulted a patient, and the patient was an adult. However, she suffered from multiple personality disorder. And over the years, as a prosecutor and as a county attorney, I've had the pleasure of dealing with many victims, too many to count. But I had never dealt with someone who suffered from that particular issue. And I wanted to make sure that myself and my co-counsel, that we could connect with her in order to build a rapport, to, if she had to testify, to make sure that she could do that, but also to make sure we could interview her and talk with her and communicate with her.
And know who you were talking to.
Yes.
And know
right.
which one.
So what we ended up doing is we consulted with an expert in that type of disorder, and surprisingly, she wasn't all that different from you and I. I had these preconceptions going in, but really just a wonderful person. And she was very intelligent, one of the most intelligent people or victims I've ever dealt with.
Yeah.
So that was really a challenge. And we just, like I said, we consulted with an expert to learn sort of how to speak with her. But it was very interesting, and I learned a lot from that.
In general, what do you consider some of the most challenging aspects of your job?
So what's super challenging for us, and I think what is some of the hardest decisions that we make as prosecutors, and ultimately me, because the buck stops with me in terms of the charging decisions and the plea offers that we make to defendants. So when you get a case from a police department and you analyze all the evidence and you have to make that decision, are we going to prosecute this person? What are we going to prosecute them with? What type of crime? Is there enough evidence? Is this something we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt? Those are very difficult decisions. It's decisions that I lose sleep over at night because I know whatever I do, it's going to affect a lot of people. It's going to affect the defendant. It's going to affect his family, his community, or her community. It's going to affect the victim. It's going to affect our community in terms of, am I doing something that is going to promote public safety? So those are very difficult decisions, especially when you have a victim who you believe, but you don't think you can prove the case. And ethically, at that point, you can't go forward. And it's very difficult to try to explain that to a victim, and it's hard. It's hard to internalize that.
Right.
So that can be super difficult. And then making plea offers and recommendations, again, those can be life-changing decisions that we make for everybody involved. So those are difficult. And then I think also what's difficult for prosecutors and defense attorneys is just the subject matter that we deal with every single day in and day out. Some of it is just the conduct involved is something that most people will never read about or hear about in their entire life, and we're dealing with it every single day. So the emotional toll that it can take on prosecutors it's tough. It's tough, and you really have to have an outlet to deal with that stress. Fortunately, I have a great group of people in our office, and we really support one another. I'm so proud of my staff, my attorneys, my legal assistants, my investigators, my victim advocates. We really support one another, and I'm really proud of that. And you really have to have that environment when you do this kind of work.
Do you have any other outlet that's not work-related?
I do. I like to work out. I like to exercise. I think that probably comes from my days playing basketball in college.
Right.
I like to spend time with my family. I like to play with my dog,
Okay.
fetch and things like that. So that's sort of what I do for
Ooh.
to relieve stress.
Okay. Getting specific, now you may feel as though it's the same case, but what's one of the most difficult legal issues in Rockingham County that you've had to deal with, and how have you dealt with it?
One of the issues that we deal with a lot, I guess I'd back up and kind of do two different things that just stand out to me. One of the issues we've had in Rockingham County, and I don't think it's just our county, I think it's an issue throughout the state. We have a tough time proving strangulation cases to jurors. So strangulation is when someone applies pressure to someone's neck and thereby impedes their breathing or blood circulation. But it's not, obviously what it isn't is it's not murder. And many times when victims sustain strangulation by an abuser, there are no marks on their neck. And that's very hard, I think, for people to believe. And so we've had a difficult time proving those cases to jurors because I think they expect there to be marks on the person's neck. They expect there to be more evidence of crime.
Bruises.
Right.
Stuff like that.
So what we've done over the years is we have called expert witnesses. We have the medical examiner's office who doesn't charge us, which is great, and they just talk about the fact that in over 50% of the cases, there may be very light marks, but so light that you can't photograph them. In about 40% of the cases, you're not going to see any marks at all. And these are actually people who die, like people that they've looked at in homicides.
Oh, wow.
So we've dealt with that issue by calling expert witnesses, but we also are doing trainings now. My office is offering a training to all of our departments in the county regarding investigations of strangulation. And we were able to do that because Raymond Police Department investigated a case where a young woman was strangled to the point where she lost consciousness several times, and there were cameras inside the house. So we were able to get copies of the video, and this woman sustained abuse for over 24 hours. And it showed her being strangled to the point where she lost consciousness. She had no marks on her whatsoever. When the police responded, you could tell they were having a hard time believing that she was strangled, and the way that she treated wasn't probably the way she should have been treated. So what we've done is I've had one of my domestic violence prosecutors and one of my advocates put together a training, and they've been going to all the different departments using this video with the victim's permission to, just press upon them that you're not always going to see these marks. This is how the victim is going to present. These are some things you can do to gather evidence to make sure that we have a strong case. So that's one of the issues. And then I'd say the other issue we deal with a lot, and it centers around domestic violence and sexual assault cases as well, is trying to educate the jury as to why victims of abuse go back and why they don't leave, why they don't report right away, and trying to make sure that they understand that. And so again, we do that by calling expert witnesses, and what they do is they educate the jury. They can't comment on the credibility of the victim. Right. But they can educate the jury and say, look, this is common. The statistics show that in this many cases, people do go back, and they have to consider their financial position. Do they have kids together? How long have they been together? There's just so many things that goes through a victim's mind, and we have to kind of educate the jury about that because a lot of what they do seems really counterintuitive to people.
Going back a bit to the strangulation issue, is there no opportunity to get DNA from the victim's neck? Like just oils from the fingerprints of the person strangling them?
Not generally. If you can get, sometimes you might be able to get, if the victim scratches her assailant, you may be able to get DNA under the fingernails, but just touching someone's neck like that, you just were unable to get that type of evidence.
Okay. What relationship does the county attorney have with departments of police? I think I know generally,
Sure.
but tell
Sure.
folks what it is.
So we work with the police department really hand in hand in investigating cases. We do train them on different issues. So I just mentioned strangulation training. We also train on suppression type issues like seizure issues, motor vehicle stops, making sure that they stay within the constitutional limits in terms of when they can hold a car there and question someone and when they need to let someone go. So we do provide trainings to the police departments. We also meet with them it really depends on what they want, but I have 3 lead attorneys in my office, and their responsibility is to work. Each of them have a particular geographic region in Rockingham County, and they work more closely with those chiefs and meet with them monthly if they want to do what we call case review. So they'll review their cases with my attorneys to, again, talk about charging decisions. Should this be a misdemeanor? Should it be a felony? We've got this crazy legal issue. How do you think we should handle it? So my lead attorneys work with the departments on those issues, and of course I'll get involved if I need to. But I find that it really promotes a great working relationship between our office and the police departments. But primarily, we get their cases, right? We get their files.
Oh, yeah.
We review them. Yeah. We will either say, look, there's not enough here, and we'll work with them to shore up the case, so to speak. Or we'll say, look, there's not enough here, and we don't think there ever will be, so we're not going to be able to prosecute it. We also, when they send up the cases to us, we have a form that we ask them to fill out. The bottom of the form, we ask, is this something you'd like to be involved in terms of like plea offers?
Yeah.
If they check a box off and say yes, then we will call the agency and say, look, this is what we're thinking about in terms of a plea offer. How do you feel about it? And we may go back and forth on it. And ultimately, it's my decision. It's my office's decision. But we do like to have that conversation with the police.
There are 37 cities or towns in Rockingham County. How do you plan to campaign throughout such a large geographic area? Do you have 37 friends that can stand outside the polling places with your signs?
So luckily I have experience with this because it's the 4th time I'm running, but it's difficult. It's a huge jurisdiction, so it's very, very difficult. I don't think I have friends in every single town in Rockingham County. Fortunately, I do have a big family. I've 10 aunts and uncles and a bunch of cousins that don't live in Rockingham County, but I may invoke their support. And the other thing you have to do is you just have to kind of get out there and talk to people and let them know what we're doing, that we're working hard for them. And I think people can see when I talk about what I do that I'm very passionate about it and I believe in it. And so sometimes when you go to different events and speak, people will volunteer to do that for you. And but it's difficult because who wants to stand outside for 8 hours, especially in November when it's freezing?
No. Does the county attorney's office ever have to deal with very controversial issues like abortion, the Affordable Care Act, et cetera? And if you have, how do you handle those issues?
So I've never had to deal with those 2 issues. I think really the closest thing that we kind of get involved in when it comes to laws, or maybe even legislating laws, is things like what comes to mind for me is it's usually a law having to do with crime, and what comes to mind for me is sexual assault, statute of limitations. So last year, I believe someone at the state legislature put forth a bill that would get rid of the statute of limitations for sexual assault crimes. Right now, if you're sexually assaulted before you turn 18, you have up until the age of 40 to report the assault. But someone had proposed a statute that would say no more statute of limitations for the crime of sexual assault. And I actually advocated for that. I went up to the State House and I testified that there should be no statute of limitations. And the reason I feel that way is because in working with victims of sexual assault over the years, many victims never report. Mm-hmm. Many never report at all, and it's really personal in terms of when a person is ready to come forward and report it. And so I feel strongly there should be no statute of limitations. Unfortunately, it didn't go through. What did occur, though, is there's no statute of limitations now for civil suits. So if a victim of sexual assault wanted to sue his or her perpetrator, they could do it civilly, and there's no statute of limitations, but we are still dealing with one in the criminal forum.
Oh, wow. What initiatives or programs, other than what you've described, have you undertaken or implemented in the county attorney's office?
So there's a lot, and I don't think I could tell you every single thing I've implemented since I've been there, but I'll talk to you about a couple. So one thing that I started is the Early Case Resolution Program. And that's a program where we put the cases that should resolve, so maybe shoplifting, thefts, possession. Again, these are all felonies, but cases that generally we know are going to plead out, and that should plead out to a fully negotiated plea. We put those cases sort of in, or I put those cases in one pile, and I have 2 prosecutors that are my ECR prosecutors. So what they do is...
ECR?
ECR, Early Case Resolution, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So the 2 prosecutors handle those cases with a goal of reaching a negotiated disposition. Again, it has to be a just outcome, but they're on a faster track so that we can resolve them quickly and we can spend more time on our more serious cases like the sexual assaults and the serious physical assaults. And we've found that we've been able to resolve about 30% of our cases with that program. So it's been really helpful in terms of giving my prosecutors more time to work on those serious cases, and it's been a very successful program. Sort
of like a broken windows program at the community level.
Right.
Where, those crimes might lead to other things, so you deal with those.
Right. Additionally, I've started a sexual assault resource team. It's called SART, and we do have them across the state in different offices. We did not have one in Rockingham County when I started, but basically it's a group of concerned citizens, whether it's a school, someone from a school like PEA might come and sit around the table, hospitals, counselors, law enforcement officers, prosecutors. We have people from the CAC, which is a place where we interview kids who have been sexually assaulted. And we meet every month and we talk about how can we make this better? How can we make our system and our investigations more better, but also victim-oriented, so people are not victimized again when the case is investigated. So I put that together my first year. When I first became county attorney, we've been able to do trainings. So we've held trainings for police officers, first responders, so folks who respond to the initial call of a sexual assault. That's been really successful. We also started doing case reviews. And what we do is we all come around the table and we talk about cases that have been resolved, and we look at, sometimes it's a case that went really well and we'll say, oh, these are all the great things that happened and we should do this again. And then there's other cases that didn't go so well, and we'll come to the table, all of the parties involved, and not really blame one another, but just say, what could we have done better here? And we use that information and we pass it along and train people in that so that we're doing the best we can for victims of sexual assault. So there's just a couple of programs.
Right. What else would you like to accomplish but haven't yet had the chance to accomplish it?
One of the things that we're working on in Rockingham County, and again, as I said, I think we work really well in Rockingham County as a team. Our superintendent at the jail is very progressive. He's really awesome. We have so many great programs at the jail, and our commissions are in support of it. For instance, when I first became county attorney, we did have a drug court, but it really wasn't well supported or funded, for that matter. When I came in, I supported it 100%. I still do. And myself and the superintendent got together and we advocated for a drug court, and we advocated for the commissioners in Rockingham County to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And that was the first year I became county attorney, and the commissioners agreed. And they paid for drug court that year. After that year, the state ended up taking over, and now the state pays for it. That's just a point in terms of how we work together in Rockingham County. But what we'd really like to see moving forward is transitionary housing for our inmates. So we have great programs at the jail. We have drug treatment there. We have batterers counseling there. We actually have medically assisted treatment in terms of for people who suffer from substance abuse. We have a lot of great programs, but the problem is once they're released, many people don't have a healthy, safe place to go back to, and they end up falling back into the same routine or the same risky behavior that they were engaging in before. So all of us in Rockingham County, the superintendent, the commissioners, myself, we're really interested in transitionary housing, and we've been looking for properties, trying to find something that's suitable to try to get that type of a program started. So I'm very interested in doing that. I'm also interested in getting new workspace for my office. We're in the Rockingham County Superior Court. We've outgrown the office. My people are kind of stuffed in there like sardines, and that's not great anyway, but right now with the COVID, it's even worse. Yeah. And the commissioners have been considering building a new structure for the county attorney's office, the sheriff's department, and I think also an area for counseling or treatment for inmates at the jail. So those are a couple of things that we're looking at moving forward, and I'm hoping we'll succeed at.
What else would you like voters to know in order that they might decide to vote for you rather than your opponent?
First of all, I just want to thank people for your support over the years and for voting for me in past elections. I sincerely love my job. I feel like I make a difference. I'm passionate about it. I try to learn something new every day. I have been doing this for over 20 years. I've prosecuted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases successfully. But not only that, I've also managed this office, which is basically the largest law firm in Rockingham County, a total of 42 people. I've managed the office successfully for 6 years. I've also managed the budget successfully for 6 years. So essentially, I have the experience, I have the knowledge, I have the ability, I have the passion to make sure that all aspects or facets of the job are handled ethically and appropriately. So I'd ask for your support and your vote on November 3rd.
Well done. I hope Rockingham County viewers who see this will appreciate your years of service, and best of luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb.
All right.